Hello, everybody. Welcome to this session this afternoon. And I wanted to let you know who I am and then what we're going to be covering today. And I'm excited about this topic. It's something that I'm passionate about. My name is Mark Royal. I've been doing this for about 4 years with Duo, now Cisco, in combination. And we're going to talk about kind of the perimeterless environments and work from home and all this stuff that we've had to deal with because of COVID, and how Duo can help in that environment. So I'm going to switch over to the presentation and get started. So I believe there's options here to raise your hand or to chat, and so we'll go ahead and have somebody moderating that as well. And if there are any questions, go ahead and fill those in, and we'll get to those as soon as we can. And then there should be some time at the end of this to go ahead and answer some of those questions live if you'd like as well. So I'll go ahead and get started. So today, the perimeter-based security approach, kind of the last century, is really no longer adequate for securing our modern enterprises. Today, organizations really need to secure a mobile workforce, especially because of what has happened during COVID, and use a mix of corporate-owned devices, personal devices, cloud-based applications, on-prem applications that exist in different locations, especially outside of the traditional corporate network. The Zero Trust mantra, really, or tag, is a modern way to deliver security without cumbersome, antiquated technologies like the VPN and MDM that are available today. In today's session, we'll discuss how Zero Trust model works, how leading organizations such as Cisco themselves, as well as Google and others, have used this approach to secure their access to critical applications and data, and how you can implement this in basically 5 easy steps. So let's jump into that. So really, enterprises today, they need business agility to be able to compete in the market. And so they need to transform to a mobile workforce that needs access to on-prem applications. They also need access to cloud applications. And they also, in a lot of cases, want to use their own device or choose the device they use, whether it's corporate, personal, laptop, mobile, et cetera. And as we've polled, different audiences, throughout these times, we have found that almost every organization in some way or another is in the process of this transition, and so or underway in a few of these steps, and so it's happening today. And so the traditional perimeter is just no longer a way that we can secure our assets, our data, our applications. So this kind of looks more on what it used to be. So VPNs were kind of the traditional way to get into the network, right? They are really it can increase risk because of least privilege. Once you get in, you have access to everything. It can be inefficient, cumbersome, and people barely tolerate it, right? So I used to be in that environment where I have to be on VPN to get access to certain things, but then I'd have to get off because I wanted to go do something else, and then I get back on again. And so it's onerous. MDM as well can raise concerns of privacy. Users typically resist it. It's difficult to deploy and manage. And NACs really are great, but they only work if people are accessing the network, right? So if they're accessing things that are outside of the network, cloud applications, Workday, Salesforce, Office 365, et cetera, then the traditional NACs no longer are effective. So this kind of summarizes that. The old approach is our assets were all tied up inside of 4 walls, and we allowed the Spoken Hub kind of access from a user perspective. And so that's how we secured it. The modern approach is more where we have the users and their devices is the perimeter. And so the applications they're accessing, and the assets, data, that's more of the spoke at this point. So again, this just kind of summarizes that. The perimeter is no longer where it used to be. The perimeter is now the users and the devices. And that really can be anywhere, from home, from Starbucks, from the office, traveling, vacation, etc. So the paradigm of zero trust is really that the network is no longer trusted, and so every time somebody authenticates, we're treating them as if they're coming from an untrusted network, whether they're sitting in the office in the headquarters or they're in a Starbucks somewhere else. So in that sense, zero trust doesn't mean a lack of trust, right? We still build trust, and you have to build trust. But what we're saying is really that the network no longer infers that trust. And so we're breaking that out. So these are the 5 steps. We'll spend some time here on the slide and kind of go through this and discuss it. And then we're going to move on to some other ways of getting in this in depth as well. So the first is really establish user identity. So you got to find out who the user is. They still say that of all the breaches that happen, 81% of those are typically because of compromised credentials. So we have to be able to establish the user is really who they say they are, and we can do that with strong authentication through 2FA or some kind of second factor authentication. The second step is to evaluate the devices. So what devices are accessing what applications, and where those devices are, what network might they be on, et cetera. It can all be still part of that evaluation of the device. Its trust, its OS version, its browser version, its plugins. Does it have antivirus? Is the disk encrypted? If it's a mobile device, is it screen locked? Does it have passcode enabled, etc. All those things are important. And once you have that user and device trust, build the third step would be to build policy and enforcement based on both of those. Not just one or the other, but together a combination of the device and user policy trust, we can determine whether or not that user should have access to the application, which is the fourth step, to provide them that access to that application in an easy, usable experience that's repeatable, so that they don't have to be on a specific VPN, they don't have to be in a specific location. They can basically be anywhere if we've established those other things and have applied that policy to enforce the rules or regulations that we need, like the HIPAA rules and regulations, or HIPAA omnibus specifically to devices for accessing certain data within the medical world. So, and then the fifth is to continually monitor that, right? So to be able to understand who is doing what, right? So if, for example, someone's accessing a brand new application for the first time that they've never accessed before, they're doing it from a brand new device that they've never used before, and they're doing it from a location maybe that we don't know that person's ever been, those type of anomalies can be bubbled up to the top, and that you can take action on those items, and maybe even auto deny access to that type of access at first, until we can determine whether or not that's something that we want to allow. So in a nutshell, that's the 5 steps for enabling zero trust. And so we're going to get into those a little more. So this is, an example of a workflow for that access. So a user access or requests access to a specific application, let's say like Office 365 or Workday or Salesforce or Epic or some other EMR system. We should identify who the user is, not only with some primary-based authentication, a username or a password, or hopefully here really soon, even passwordless, and then some strong second factor, something they have, something they are, a biometric, a Face ID, a token, a push are popular methods. And then also evaluate the trustworthiness of the device. Is this a corporate-owned device? Is it a personal device? If it is a personal device, does that personal device have some kind of antivirus installed? Is it, the disk encrypted? Does it have a password enabled, right? These are all things that are required by HIPAA Omnibus, for example, in that specific regulation. And then enforce those policies, based on the application that they're trying to access. If they're just trying to access, some calendaring tool for, publicly available source, is it as important to have that security as it is if they were trying to access, like Epic, and where they're going to be, prescribing some kind of drug or narcotic to somebody. And then, give them that access that they need and do it without forcing them through, a bunch of hoops. Do it in a single sign-on type fashion, or, web or proxy-based access type action where they can get that from anywhere without the need to have something else installed on their device. So, what's missing from that workflow, right? Well, the traditional MDMs, the VPNs, and the NACs aren't part of this workflow anymore because, again, the user can access applications anywhere or from anywhere. And so some of these traditional solutions may not be in effect. But it takes time, right? This isn't something that all organizations everywhere are going to be able to do overnight. And those who have started or tried, like a Cisco, Google, whatever, it takes some time to provide this access to all of the internal apps or external apps, all within the same environment. And so even with these, Duo, for example, will integrate with all of your MDMs or your VPNs, that you have in place today as you start making a ZeroTrust transition in the market. So this is kind of the list of things that you would need to do in order to deploy or start to deploy that ZeroTrust type environment. And the first step is gathering users. Where are your users? Where do they exist? In the case of Duo, which is really nice, is we're identity agnostic. It doesn't matter where your identities are stored. Are they in a local AD? Are they in a cloud directory like Azure or Google or some other cloud-based directory? Or even some third-party just user store. So once we know where those users are, it's just a matter of determining their access into those devices, right, or from which devices that they have. So as they're accessing applications, we can determine where or what those devices are that they're coming in on. So I went. There were 2 hospitals here. I'm in the Carolinas. That we recently worked with, and they thought they really had a good ownership of all the devices that they had in their environments. And when we deployed Duo, we found that there was a large number of additional devices they had no idea that were accessing certain applications. And based on HIPAA like omnibus regulations, we found that like half of those were not compliant, and we're able to easily help them enforce those compliance regulations without really interrupting the workflow or access to the end user. And then, inventory your applications. Where are they? Are they on-prem? Are they web? Are they proprietary? Are they in the cloud? Third party? How are we going to access and integrate all those applications? Deploying a secure proxy is one of the ways that we get around using a VPN. So you can allow these internally accessible apps that used to be only accessible via VPN, now accessible externally from anywhere through a web-based proxy. And then obviously when you're doing that, you want to really gauge trustworthiness of both the user and the device. And you can do so in a nice, easy manner, through things like single sign-on, through some of the new protocols like SAML and OIDC and others that allow you to do these kind of great things. And then bringing it all together with the strength of an engine policy that allows this to all happen really in the background, seamless to the user access, so that that they'll continue to use it and not try to go around these processes. So this is one example. I didn't have a recent one of Cisco's deployment, but it's very similar. where really it doesn't matter if you're sitting in the corporate office, like here, Cisco's got major office buildings in RTP, or if I'm at home, which I'm right now, the access to the application that I'm trying to get to is the same access, regardless of where I'm sitting. And so I'm going to have to go through that same workflow, that same authentication, device-based security, and access, into that internal or external based application. What's cool about this is, for example, Google here took, I think it was announced like 2+ years to get this done, and they didn't disclose how much it cost to get this done. What Duo has done in this case is made a commercially available solution that allows you to do this within weeks or months, sometimes even days if you're in a hurry, depending on how many applications you want to get done really quick, with our Duo Beyond edition, and to do it securely, where we can identify that user. Our bread and butter has always been MFA, but we also have the ability to posture on your devices, understand whether it's corporate, personal, what's the state of that device, and then also provide that seamless access into the applications you want, whether they're on-prem or in the cloud, without enforcing you to go through the traditional MDM or VPN type solutions. So why is this awesome? I love it. I've been here for years, and just keep hearing some great stories every time we get around to deploying this. One of the reasons why is we go back to that original statistics, where 81% breaches get pointed back to a compromised credential. A bad actor in this case would have to not only steal the user's username, their password, they'd have to steal their phone or second mode of authentication, their MFA, and their trusted device to be able to gain access into the applications. Another example of this would be if we were just trying to protect against a compromised device, like you're going to allow BYOD to certain applications. What we really try to do is make it easy for the user, right? So we'll deny access if the device doesn't meet certain criteria, but we will typically allow that person to update or fix the problem that they have, right? If their OS is vulnerable because it's out of date, or the browser has a 0-day that we're aware of, like Chrome just came out the last couple of weeks with some pretty important security updates. And at Duo Cisco, we were forced to update immediately our browsers, specifically Chrome in this case, to meet certain regulations before I could access my applications. So they walk you through that. So if I get denied access, it will tell me, well, I can't get access because my Chrome is out of date, and it will walk me right into the Chrome update, so that I can then update my browser and then refresh and get right back into the application I needed to access. So this kind of summarizes this, all back from those 5 steps we talked about earlier, but kind of in more definition, where the first step is to really deploy MFA and deploy it everywhere. And nobody does that better than Duo. We can do it on every application, from your on-prem applications to even accessing operating systems like Linux and Windows, to your cloud applications, including things like Azure or any other third-party hosted app. We also do really well at posturing your devices. Like I said, we have been able to go in time and time again to customers and show them all the devices that are accessing these applications and what status they're in, or whether they're patched, whether they're not, whether they're out of date, whether it be a mobile device, or laptop, or a corporate-owned machine. And then be able to then whittle through that and decide what policies, right, that you're going to apply based on that user and the device and where they might be located, and assess that risk depending on application. Again, per application. Some applications maybe aren't as critical as others, and so you won't have as stringent or strict as policy. And then the 4th step would be continue to at first we could work with a VPN, right? We could work with remote access that way, and secure that through MFA. But then it would be, to deploy proxies so that we can then eliminate that access and be able to access it from anywhere without the need for a specific tool like a VPN. And then fifth is to continue to monitor. So Duo has built into its solution Trust Monitor, which is a very powerful user-based analytics tool that constantly is monitoring risky authentications, like we talked about before. Someone's accessing a new application for the first time from a different device, from a different world, or different part of the world, or they accessed the application 10 minutes ago in New York, and now they're trying to access it from, some other part of the country. We can stop those authentications. So with that, this kind of summarizes those 5 steps and concludes the presentation.